ahead and say that it is not an overreaction to be very concerned about the pass defense. I know it was not the starter, Trey Waynes, but very clearly that was the plan for the Dallas Cowboys to target Mike Hughes over and over and over again. The final number, 17 times Mike Hughes was thrown at in one game. And the Vikings in pass defense and expected points added today, 20th is where they rank waking up. They have the same pass defense basically as the Seahawks, who have largely been shredded all year long. Is there a fix to this? Because I don't think that's an overreaction, but what's the fix?
Well, when you decide you're going to stop the run, that usually means that you're going to put more guys in the box, an extra guy in the box or something, which means you're going to have these one-on-ones on the outside. And, in the Mike Zimmer style of defense, it's, he drafts corners high. We have 3 first-rounders out there, and their job is to be sort of shut down guys. And it's really the key to the defense. And you find your great players different spots of the draft, but it's reliant on the fact that you can play all that man-to-man coverage on the outside. And Mike, I don't know if I've seen that number before, 17 targets on one guy, in the ballgame. Dak Prescott was consistently going to his right. And so it's an issue because it's also an issue that, Xavier Rhodes has been a guy that's been picked on also a lot this year. He was sort of, it seemed like to me, teams are targeting him. And Trey Waynes has not played great football. Of course, didn't play last night, but he hasn't played phenomenal yet this year. So you have 3 first-round corners, a lot of resources, put into that position, and it was the weakness of that football game last night. But I do love how Zimmer said you sort of have to do one or the other. We want it, and I do believe it's better to take away the runs rather than allow a team just to eat you up on the ground and control the clock and really sort of control the football game. They decided to stop the run last night, putting extra guys in the box, and but that led them to be susceptible in the passing game, and in particular with an offensive line that was giving Dak Prescott plenty of time to take apart those cornerbacks.
Yeah, and I get that they did not want Ezekiel Elliott to run all over them, but you gave up 400 yards passing and should have lost the game. I mean, you really should have lost the game. They have first down and goal at the 6. They don't get it in. And then Jason Garrett, stunningly to me, decides to kick a field goal to go down by 4 against a team that's moving the ball all day against him, which I did not understand at all. And then on the final drive, he's cruising down and they decide to run twice, which baffled me as well. Especially since the Vikings were stopping Ezekiel Elliott all day long. You really reasonably could have given up way more points in that game to the Dallas Cowboys by leaving a lot of man-to-man coverage with Mike Hughes and letting him get smoked by Amari Cooper. I was really surprised that they did run at the end of the game because of that, and then throw at Ezekiel Elliott and against Eric Kendricks, which is a really bad idea, the way Kendricks has been playing this year when Amari Cooper was absolutely tearing apart Mike Hughes. I think there does have to be some sort of adjustment because as you go forward here, you're going to face a lot of really good quarterbacks. You've got Russell Wilson coming up. You've got Aaron Rodgers. You've got Phillip Rivers. You've got Matt Stafford. I mean, this is not going to be easy as they go down the stretch. And then whoever you play in the playoffs will more likely than not have a good quarterback. And if this is the way your corners are playing, you have to find a way to help these guys out because if you don't, we're going to get more of this. And then if your offense sputters at all, then you're just eliminated.
Well, the question is then, do you play more 2 high safety defenses where the free safeties and the strong safeties are helping out the corners? You can play over the top and they don't have to chase as much and they can play a little bit more cover 2 or even they call it cover 4 defense, but the corners are not out there completely by themselves, or you can have droppers, drop underneath the cornerbacks and the receivers, and so all those comebacks that they were hitting last night near the sidelines are then taken away, and so the opposing team has to work more of the inside of the football field, which is I think been a pretty good strength for the Vikings and the way the linebackers have played pretty well in pass coverage. But it wasn't just Mike Hughes, by the way. Mackenzie Alexander didn't have a great game either. There was a 3rd and I think fairly long last night, and the Vikings played 2-man, which is in that technique in 2-man, the DBs play, the defensive backs play inside and behind basically the wide receivers. They're basically trying to funnel everything to the outside. So you're expecting, as an offense, you want to, out breaking routes where they're just straight out routes, from the slot, corner routes, from the slot. Those types of things are what a lot of times beat two man. Well, there was a play last night where Randall Cobb got about 4 yards of separation on Mackenzie Alexander on one of those corner routes in two man. And you have to be expecting those types of plays as a defensive back, and you should be undercutting them, and it should be more contested, and it wasn't last night. So it wasn't just Mike Hughes. Mackenzie Alexander didn't play great. I'm not sure if they decided to throw in Holton Hill a little bit. We saw him in a little bit of action last night. Hadn't seen him a lot. Obviously, the first half of the season, he was out because of suspension. But I like the way some of the things that he was doing last year when he was just sort of an extra guy because they had, Xavier and Trey, but he was playing some last year. I thought he played pretty well in the preseason as well. So maybe, they try some different things. Also, maybe they try to blitz more. Maybe they try to blitz just so the quarterback, the opposing quarterbacks have to get the ball out of their hands quicker, so our defensive backs don't have to chase as long, right? So maybe that's part of the equation. I'm not really sure. It's a problem. I do love the fact that again that Mike Zimmer decided, you only can really do you only can dictate a lot of times one of the two things. Should we allow them to run the football and really protect the pass, or should we stop the run and maybe try to challenge our corners? And obviously the Cowboys were very, very successful last night.
Last night, Holton Hill played 8 coverage snaps, didn't allow a completion into his coverage on 2 attempts, but everybody else got shredded. And that might be part of the answer, would be to have Holton Hill rotate in more often. We've got Eric Eager for Pro Football Focus coming up at 3. I want to ask him the same question. Like, what do the numbers say about what the Vikings should do? Stopping the run certainly helped to some extent because you forced Dak Prescott to play great. But what he did was play great and almost beat you. And, if it was just Dak Prescott having an amazing game, I think I would say, look, that guy's good, and he was really on his game last night. But Matt Moore beat you, and Chase Daniel moved the ball on you, and Matt Stafford put up 30 points on you. And you basically now have to rely on your offense. You have to say, every game you go into against a good quarterback, your defense is going to allow some yards, going to allow some points, and now you've got to hope for great red zone defense and hope that your offense is on its game each and every week, because I just don't see an obvious other solution to this thing.
Well, and let's just imagine last night if the Vikings offense wasn't doing much, if they weren't running the football well, how many yards and, points that this Vikings defense would have given up. So, yeah, it's a real problem. And, these coaches aren't blind to it. They know it's an issue, and they're going to be in there trying to do, something different. I don't think they're going to sit there and just be like, well, our guys just have to play better. I think they're going to try to help them play better, whether it's just, teaching different techniques or trying to teach things that they're doing poorly, or schematically trying to come up with ways that, they're not out there completely by themselves. But, a good offense a lot of times is, really helps the defense. And, the way the Vikings can sort of control the clock and the way they're grinding out yards on the ground. I mean, that was probably our best defense last night, was our offensive line.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the referees here, and I don't want to spend too much time on it because, it's exciting where we're at right now with what happened with the Gophers on Saturday and then the Vikings on Sunday. I mean, it's just a great weekend for football fans here. So I don't want to get anyone too angry and frustrated by talking too much about the refs. But once again, this weekend was an incredible display, from whether, Aaron Rodgers was roughed by just being tackled, or what we saw with Harrison Smith. It was a bad call for pass interference against Harrison Smith, but then later in the drive, he clearly tackles Jason Witten in the end zone, and it's not called. And normally you would say, well, they have challenges now for this. This is exactly why we have them, because Harrison Smith just tackled a dude in the end zone.
Well, I disagree with you a little bit on that. I actually thought that Witten just sort of like ran into Harrison and ended up being just sort of a, one of those things where people just sort of get their, they get tripped and they get their legs crossed or whatever. You could probably call something on Harrison Smith on that play, but to me, like, Witten just sort of ran into him. And I hate it when defensive players get called for some sort of penalty because an offensive guy basically runs into him. The holding penalty was just, I don't even know what to say about that. Like, I know these officials have to, it's very, very hard to officiate these games, but that play is like, what are you even looking at to say that? Just because he was right next to him and it was such good coverage, you just have to call penalty because that's just like not possible on Jason Witten? Or that made no sense to me. And then, yeah, whatever it goes, well, it was a makeup call. I don't really believe there are makeup. This is not the NBA. I don't really think there are, like, these referees are thinking about, like, well, we should, Harrison got screwed on the last one, so let's do a makeup call here. I think they just probably just saw two bodies collide and didn't really think that was a penalty. So it's a hard sport to referee. And to officiate, but that call last night was terrible. It bothers me that it's like they're trying really hard to find something rather than just sort of call the obvious stuff that you can very easily see. And that Harrison Smith holding call, to me, there was nothing obvious about that last night.
No, there wasn't. And I did think it was interference on Harrison later, but you can't even dare to throw the red flag at that point because they're just not overturning them. And Ron Rivera ran into the same thing. I think after the game, was it Ron Rivera or Mike Vrabel? One of the coaches went completely bananas about it. Just like, they're not overturning them, so I can't challenge them. There's nothing I can do here. And we've put ourselves in such a goofball position by all agreeing that these are huge penalties that change games and we should be able to review them. But the NFL saying, yeah, but we're not actually going to overturn any of them if you do. So you're just wasting timeouts. And they're really impacting the way the games turn out, not only with just bad calls, which has always happened. And I've always understood about sports that will happen. That didn't ever really bother me that much, that bad calls impact games. It bothers me much more that you say, oh, we've got a solution, but we're not going to use it. But it still exists, so you could try it if you're a dummy. Like, what? Like, just make a statement on this. I just want the NFL to make a statement and say, look, don't challenge these anymore. We screwed it up. We're sorry.
The ability to challenge a pass interference call is, I knew it would be just an absolutely terrible rule, because it's something that, unless it's just so blatantly obvious, like that Rams game, the Rams Saints game last year, and it's a sort of a deciding spot in the game. Yeah, you'd like to overturn that one. It's just too important. It's a $15 billion industry. You want to make the right call. The issue is now that when there is obvious pass interference. There was obvious pass interference on Amari Cooper last night when he pushed off Mike Hughes in the end zone for that catch. That was obvious pass
that was
interference.
Definitely a push off.
No, and the fact that we have replay, but there's no way you'd want to replay that or you'd want to challenge that, because it's not going to go your way. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. That makes zero sense that you can replay a call and but yet you're not going to win, even though you're obviously right if you try to challenge it. Like, that rule is not going to last another year. But I also believe that the roughing the quarterback calls, the roughing the passer calls, those, if they're going to be review, they're going to review things like pass interference. I think those things should be reviewable. And maybe I'm just a little bit more old school, that back when I was playing, they didn't protect the quarterback nearly as much as they are now. But listen, quarterbacks got to take hits, and there's something about the guys that played for a long time in this league. You go back to the Joe Montanas and the Dan Marinos and Jim Kellys and those guys. Those guys are getting massacred in the pocket. But there was something about being able to be tough enough and strong enough and durable enough to survive those hits for 16 games for a 15-year career. It's way too sort of ticky-tack for these quarterbacks in the pocket when they're just getting hit after they throw, or they're just getting tackled or sacked, to call everything a penalty just because that looks like it might hurt. Like, oh, that one hurts, so we should call a penalty. Again, we all understand that NFL games are way better when starting quarterbacks are playing,
yes,
and that the ratings immediately go down when backups are playing, and in particular when backups are playing.
Which they've gotten hurt anyway, by the way. 16 backups have played this year. What a great season for you.
But also, sometimes starting quarterbacks like Cam Newton get hurt, and the backup comes in, and you start to go, hey, I actually think this backup quarterback is better than the starter, which I do believe that. In Carolina, I had not seen Kyle Allen play. We're going off schedule here, but I had not seen him play. I was massively impressed in that football game. And, when we talk about the Vikings and Kirk Cousins, like, carrying a football team, Kyle Allen was trying to carry that football team in that game, in particular in the fourth quarter of that game. They were throwing the ball basically every play. It's in the snow. In Green Bay.
What a great day it was yesterday for football, right?
It was that was one of the great, sort of football weekends, except for my Cyclones lost. They tried to go for 2 against Oklahoma and didn't get it. That would have been nice. That would have really capped it off. But that was a phenomenal game, and I think Kyle Allen is going to be the long-term solution in Carolina. And you saw him try to carry that football team completely on his back in terrible conditions. He was making accurate throws. He was scrambling around the pocket, trying to buy time. He was getting harassed. And he really, to me, sort of carried that football team on his back at the end of the game when the Carolina defense couldn't stop Green Bay from running for 9 yards a carry, it seemed like. So, phenomenal game by him. And as I said, I think he's going to be the long-term solution. So it's not all lost when you're backup quarterbacks in the game. Sometimes you end up finding these sort of diamonds in the rough that you never knew about unless the starters went down. So, maybe they shouldn't protect these quarterbacks nearly as much as they are.
Maybe we should hurt more quarterbacks so the backups can play is a very Sage Rosenfels take. That's a biased take, I think, Sage.
Well, backups always make it interesting. Sometimes you end up having the Matt Moore, types of games, and they throw a couple touchdowns and surprise everybody, and then sometimes they also throw 3 or 4 interceptions too. And but they always make it interesting, and the stat sheet gets filled up. Sometimes it's offensively, and many times it's defensively. But either way,